Okay, thank you everyone and welcome to the panel session. I'm welcoming my panelists and people who are here, and as well we have live streaming on CDN YouTube, and we will have the session available afterwards on CDN YouTube. Thank you everyone for coming on Saturday morning. I will introduce CDN and ZOS. ZOS stands for Green Youth of Serbia, and we are a host organization of the CDN's event, cross-regional meeting for women and non-binary political activists, young in Eastern Europe. And in general, Green Youth of Serbia is tackling ecology topics, human rights, social justice, and we are organizing events mostly with youth. We are based in Belgrade, but as well trying to have some members outside of it. And we are a member organization of CDN, which stands for Cooperation and Development Network Eastern Europe. It's a network of organizations, NGOs, individuals, and also youth wings active in Eastern Europe, as well dealing with youth and organizing events with like the main topic of non-formal education on similar topics as well, green politics. We are having 15 member organizations all around Eastern Europe and are trying to organize our events there, empower youth, and in generally work with youth. I'll be welcoming our panelists for today. We have Biljana Đorđević with us. She's an MP, member of small council, and a member of a women's group in our party, Green Left Front, as well political scientist and professor at Faculty of Political Sciences in Belgrade. With us we have as well Natalija Stojmenović. She's a city councillor as well as member of women's group of Green Left Front and political scientist as well, finished political science in Belgrade. And we have Anja Zlatović with us. She's a spokeswoman of Green Youth of Serbia and as well a member of main board. Anthropologist and research associate at the Faculty of Philosophy with us. So thank you for coming. Yes, we have some questions prepared, after which we will allow audience as well, both here and online, to ask some questions. So yeah, we can start. This is a question for everyone, so you can answer however you feel. Like, can you tell us what are some, in your opinion, biggest challenges participating in the parliament, city council, or youth politics?
Okay, I'll start. Well, initially, you might say, why would for women in particular this be different than for others? Because we do have some heritage here of inclusionary feminist politics that were involved in a sense that we participate in workforce, especially also coming from the political movement that was done by Belgrade Round. It had strong participation of women as well, and we tried also that within our organization that now transformed into a party, also build structures to give incentives to women to participate. But then actually when we entered institutional politics, you realize that even though I would also say we have enough women and maybe even majority of women among members, they are still not in majority in taking responsibility for various functions. I mean, we do, even in the organization, we struggle a little bit with that in terms of our ideals, how we want things to be. But we are far better than other organizations and parties. And then when you enter institutions, in my case, when we entered parliament, then you realize that basically almost all presidents of parliamentary group are men, president of the parliament is man. You do have vice presidents, women, and deputies, women. I'm a deputy of our parliamentary group, and we do have now 3 women running parliamentary groups, but initially it was just 2. One, the biggest opposition group, and the other one, extreme right. parliamentary group, which is also not unusual, in Europe. This women's face of the far right, but just this very, very basic descriptive representations gives you an image that we're still far ahead, far from gender equality, even in this just very low-level representation, because this is not enough, just to have women. Of course, they have to fight for some feminist policies. And then there is this aggression in the language used in the institutions, which is typically patriarchal and manly. And to try to promote different type of language, it means basically you will not be heard initially. And that's a huge challenge. It was a huge challenge for me in particular. I remember my first day, it was a constitutive session, and I asked for the breach of rule book, and then I have the right in 2 minutes to explain why I think that the Speaker of the Parliament breached the rule book of the Parliament. And he completely ignored me because I just did, decently put up my rule book and asked for a word. And then a male colleague, experienced MP, who has been an MP for years, from a different party, said to me, "You're very nice. You're too nice. You should be more aggressive. You should stand up and you should say, I want this a breach of rule book." And then I realized, yes, unfortunately, I guess it's a challenge. I mean, it's not how I want for us to do things, and it's not in my nature that my first reaction is aggressive one. Of course, I think we can always be aggressive when we're very feisty and angry because the situation is like that. And even in these situations, this is natural to me. Then I fight. But I don't think we should do it just for every single time. And unfortunately, institutions are sending the message to us that we should do it. And I think the challenge is that we forget that we actually want to change how we speak to each other, how politics should be like. And then it's a challenge how to negotiate this. At what point to accept the rules of the game now, to be able to play the game, and then how to transform it. Because oftentimes we can't do it both at the same time. We can't impose people to listen to us if they just don't ignore us. And women know that very well in various occasions. So I think it's a challenge how at some point we even normalize behavior that we don't want, in a sense that we don't fight it every single time, but try to be visible and then show by example that things can be done differently. And there are many other examples, but I think this is one the most telling, and I'll stop here. Maybe afterwards I give you others.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the invitation, and I will, because we came from the same organization, so I will try to add something from also organizational point of view and how it affected the political life, to cover also some aspects that maybe Biljana didn't. What I think is, and of course I will speak from my position, the position of a young female actor in the politics, that is somehow different from a male perspective. So when it comes to organization, I think that even as Biljana said, we have a framework that should incentivize women to do politics. But also you can have a great organizational framework. That framework doesn't picture the society, and maybe that is where we are wrong, because we are preparing persons for something that they will not experience at the first sight when they enter the politics. So I don't say that we shouldn't have that framework, but and I'm sure that we couldn't have that experience before we entered. Even if we somehow, all of us, imagine how that will look like, we didn't have that imagination how it went. So it's it's one perspective. For example, in organization, I always respected my organization, and I was always a part of it, because it was never, my opinion was never questioned on the basis that I'm female or that I'm young. It was always respected, and it was, if it was wrong, it was arguments presented why it's wrong, but it was never excluded on that, on that stuff. And that was really important for me, and that I think was the most incentive part for me to want to do politics. But from the other hand, you can see that also in organization is happening what you can experience in political life, and somehow what media are reflecting, and that is the pattern that all of us are, I think, are experiencing. So as a young woman, you somehow always need to prove something. And when you enter to the space, you need, I mean, I will talk from my experience, but I think that is for all my colleagues in the parliament and in the city council. We, even if it's not expected, we feel that we need to prove more, that we need to work more, that somehow, even if our colleagues, male colleagues, doesn't want, the system is somehow set up that it's at the end that somehow they are the sun and we're eclipsing around it, even if we are doing also a lot of work. But our work usually will not be recognized externally if we don't have some sort of justification from our male colleagues. If someone male doesn't say, oh, she's good, you should listen to her, journalists won't listen to me. They will exclude my, you know, I'm here to, and I experienced that a lot in the beginning, where I was always the city councillor to give you the data on some problem, but never the opinion. I mean, I gave the opinion, but that was never something that they would say, she said that. No, she said the numbers, she knows that stuff, but opinion, that is not for her. So, and I think that is the, somehow something that we need to overcome first, that constantly, I mean, in politics you need to prove something all the time. That is okay, because, you know, there is no finish line where your work ends. You need to communicate with the citizens. But somehow when we enter the space, and that is that we need some sort of auto-reflection, that we work a lot more to be on the level that our male colleagues are. But also that somehow we didn't question that enough. That also more is expected of us, and you will often see that somehow all the substantial work, all the care work is done by women, and or all that invisible work, but something that is externally visible is still somehow reserved for a man. And that is, I think, it's at this point something that it needs to be reflected, but I understand why it stayed until this point somehow. From the other side, when it comes to city councillor, my colleague from our city councillor group has the 3 youngest people in the city council so far. One is our male colleague, and 2 of us are female colleagues. And you know, I didn't understood a lot of time that actually, while I was trying to somehow cope with the situation when we have an assembly, how that looks like, as Biljana said, you need to shout, you need to be some sort of aggressive, somehow I managed that, and I was good in that. I mostly blame that I come from Vranje. We are usually that kind of woman, I knew because of a really patriarchal environment that I grew up, I knew somehow I was adapted to recognize the moments where I need to stand up, where I need to have the voice, and so on. But a lot of my friends and a lot of my colleagues couldn't, because that wasn't the environment they on that level experienced. So in some auto-reflection, I saw that actually in some point I'm using a male principle to, you know, that kind of aggressiveness and all that comes with that, not going through the compromise or care, but the opposite, that I'm using that in order to cope with the situation. And I think that is the situation that we were facing, that we were somehow sustaining all the other principles, but we entered the space where our principles are not important. And I also I spent a lot of time thinking, okay, what is the strategy, how we can change that, and somehow I think that, you know, for me it was okay. Apparently, we need to show that we can reverse those principles, but that those principles can also go against the one that are promoting them, mostly men. So I think that is and I will conclude that my biggest fear when we are trying to incentivize our colleagues in the party to do politics, that we are preparing them for something that is totally different. But now I'm somehow I feel better about that, because now we know with what we are facing. So far we didn't.
So it's interesting for me to hear everything, because it reminds me of what we talked yesterday at the session, open circle session. Like there were like literally the same sentences that we used almost. So it's something that we also, as young women that are some of us are even entering politics for the first time maybe, saw. And for me it was like that I started from this green circle, first like in Serbia, and then I went first to international events where I even thought at the beginning the rules are too strict. For example, like those of you who went to those events know that there's like gender balance when speaking, like men can't talk 2 times in a row, woman has to talk. And I was like, well, yeah, do we have to do that? Maybe that's too strict. And then I realized afterwards that it does make a point, because some men were constantly, even in those green circles, like raising hand and wanting to speak over and over and over again, while women just were like, well, I'm gonna like keep it to myself because I have nothing maybe valuable to add. I don't want to take somebody else's space, while men were constantly trying to take more and more space. But in those circles, at least you have that feeling, if you talk with those men, they're at least going to listen to you. Very rarely somebody is going to answer back, be snappy, or be argumentative. Of course, it happens everywhere, but it's to a lesser extent. You have a feeling like these men are willing to work with us, to cooperate for the better ideas, better standards. And then I came to this seminar of the youth from political parties in Serbia, and we had this session about like women's work from the last seminar, where I of course realized, because it's like all the political parties in Serbia, all the youth from these political parties, I'm not going to be like one-on-one with most of them. What I did not realize that nobody is going to have like even similar opinion. Even like for the basic question, like are women in politics equal as men? Men were like, yeah, like of course you are, you just have to fight like everybody else does. And then when you try to explain to them, we have problems, they're like, but we have problems too, why don't we talk about men problems? And then you're like, why do we always have to talk about male problems whenever we mention women's problems? And they're like, you're now saying we don't have problems. And they're constantly being, trying to prove like we are in wrong, that they're absolutely not listening to our opinions, our ideas. And I remember, because I was writing in Zos chat, somebody mentioned like, is there moderation? And I was like, you can't moderate 14 men that are literally yelling. And at one point, like, there was even a moment when I really wanted to like stand up and go out, when one guy said like, and what are we going to do with women who fuck their way up? Like, I was so shocked with that language, because it was, are we really going to go there? Are we really going there? And at one point, when the women who presented everything pointed out like tweets that are directed to female politicians in Serbia, that are like, some are really, really graphic, really disgusting. These men said, well, this is not discrimination, this is just like basic politeness. And you realize, like, I don't know even where to start with the talk. I'm handling this topic with the people who don't even want to listen, who are disregarding everything that we say, who are not realizing like what the word discrimination can even mean, what sexism even is, that are absolutely like pushing away from the idea that sexism exists on any point. And I got kind of depressed afterwards, not because only that, but also because how much it affected me. So that was maybe my biggest challenge at that point. If you ask me how it would go, I would say it would not go great, but I was still emotionally affected. And I really hate how even after being discriminated all the time, you're still again being hurt by even somebody whose opinion you don't care about much. And it's kind of hard on everyday basis to fight with everything that we fight in our everyday lives, to fight with these men, and also again to fight with our own emotional moments of anger and hurt and rage, and the feeling that you can't change much, you can't like begin to tackle. And is the work even that we're doing like taking an effect? But thankfully, to finish it on a bit lighter note, I am grateful that we have these male politicians that are willing to listen, that I'm surrounded by men who are willing to listen and who are willing to talk to their friends, because at the end of the day, I think that also can make a difference, that we do, no matter like how hurt we are, we have to try and try again. And like I yelled at the end of that session at those men, because like as we talk now, like you can't be polite, you have to yell. If they're yelling, if the event can't be moderated, you have to yell back. And that was the point. And like, are they going to see me like as the angry feminist? They might, but I don't care. Like I am angry feminist, and I'm fine with that.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for sharing. It's interesting that all three of you mentioned that you need to like speak up, be louder, like even in our circles. So it's really sad to hear. But yeah, luckily we're learning. So yeah, the next question is mostly for Biljana and Natalija. But yeah, Anja, if you wish to contribute, you're of course welcome. Like, do you have some advices or coping mechanism that you acquired by now that like you could share with the audience, like how, as an advice, or how to go through these problems?
One of the interesting things that happened to me that I think we should think about it as a normal thing, but having a bit more experience, I'm older than both of you, so I had a bit more of this experience before. So I didn't actually expect people to even care and think about that we have another set of problems besides just being an opposition politician in Serbia, which of course is a problem, you know, but that we have an additional layer. And that was that after, you know, became MP and then all these stressful parliamentary sessions that became very much, you know, visible. People started watching parliaments after boycott of the parliament that we had in the previous 2 years. that people would meet me on streets. Initially, these were friends, and mostly, I also have to admit, female friends, and most from the feminist also circles, which is, you know, they know, you know, so they read about it, so, you know, like this is now the experience. They would ask me, how are you, you know, and just a basic question that, through the question, it's not just the regular one that we asked each other, not really thinking about it, but really, you know, being worried about me, you know, looking at me in the parliament after hours and hours of sessions, seeing that I'm worried or that I look tired, you know, that I'm exhausted. Like these questions, how are you? You have to take care of yourself. You know, you shouldn't burn out, because this is the long struggle. So you don't need to be there every second of the day. You don't have to be everywhere. You have to last, you know, you have to be, you shouldn't expire by the end of this year, basically. And even though these are things that I say to myself, it's important when people say it regularly to you, because we tend not to listen to it. Like, we know all this, but we, at the end of the day, put ourselves last. So it was important. So in some very stressful moments, I would hear this voice. I don't have to do everything. I sometimes can say, okay, I've done my fair share for this. I need to sleep now, or I need to be with my daughter. I need to do something else. And of course, I haven't done that enough. You know, I haven't been enough with myself and with my family, because that is the reality of this of being a politician in Serbia, especially as a woman, and also a big reason why not many women at our age with small kids are doing this, because it's very, very difficult, and it's not really friendly environment for this. But it was important, and it was a surprise, you know, to me, because oftentimes I felt we're alone. We talk to each other and we care for each other. We say this to each other, but, you know, to come externally, it was important, because I realized that people now, I mean, people have been starting to talk more about mental health and care, and feminist circles for sure, but I think it went even beyond that. And for me, it was not just that I felt that people care, but it's also that the values of care are spreading around, which is also a motivating factor that people realize, you know. And so that was, I think that was important. The other thing is that through these various processes, you learn your own mistakes, you know. Whenever we talked in the previous round that we all at some point had to yell, and sometimes it was good that we did that, sometimes it was not. So kind of, you also learned when it worked, and when it worked, I'm not meaning instrumentally, but when is the situation that is absolutely necessary that you do that, and when is that actually you lost your temper, that you should have just say, okay, time out for me now, because there is no good thing that I can do now. I'm so stressed, and it will not help if I participate in this. I need to remove myself from this and then come with clean head and clean thoughts and, you know, a better approach to this problem. So I think, you know, in assessing these various moments, I have become better. But this is something that you cannot learn in any books. You can hear these advices, but you just have to learn from experience. You have to be in this situation, live in them, and make mistakes, and then learn from it. Analyze them, of course, with friends, and mostly feminist friends, and just realize this, that sometimes we are our own enemies. Sometimes we are too harsh on ourselves as well, and so these are all different types of both advices that I've been given to take care of myself, and also mechanisms that evolve through the process. And these are useful in life in general, not just in politics. So if somebody is listening now this and says, oh, this is too heavy, I don't want to do anything with it, you do learn a lot of valuable social skills, because you have to talk to people, and working with people is hard. It's very enriching as well, but it's very hard, because you have to think not just about arguments, about rational, but also about irrational, about people's desires and people's needs, and sometimes sometimes you don't just recognize that people just want to be heard, and that's maybe even if you still say no to a proposal or an idea that you don't think it's a good one, people want to be heard, that somebody actually values the fact that they have some proposal, and then maybe you explain to them why you have more information because we are insiders, you have some more information why something will not work now, then this is a level of respect for the other person, and then even if you, at the end of the day, still disagree, I think there is some mutual understanding that you have to do it. And I think we now in politics, we have to spend a lot of time doing that. And sometimes you feel, oh, I could have spent this time doing something else, working on a policy that I personally might prefer more. But politics is actually a lot to do with this, with how you communicate with people and how you find this understanding. And then that people understand that even if when you make a mistake, and we all will make a mistake, it's not because we did it on purpose, but because simply we're not perfect and we have pressure of time and of external factors, but that we have done our best. So in that sense, my advice is also that no matter how it's hard, it is our job to talk to people, and we should try to find as much as time to do it. But we also have to find time for ourselves to have some rest, because this is a tiring process. Communicating is very, very tiring.
Yeah. Before I go through my phenomenal advices, of course, I just don't want for anyone who is listening to this to some sort feels like this is not a good job and that it's, it's difficult as any job. But for me, I wouldn't change this. I wouldn't change my job for anything in the world, because I feel so driven that we can actually make some change. But we also need to realize, in order to get to a change, you also need to learn something and to change. So that is the difficult part, but also can be a really rewarding, as Biljana said. When it comes to coping mechanisms, well, as an institution of coping mechanisms, my first advice is to try not to cope. I'm tired of coping with everything, and I think that comes from, everyone is expecting from you to cope on some sort of a level. But I don't think that we need to cope. I think we should talk, and we should see what we should develop in order not to cope with different situations. And those are not situations that are, we have situations that we experience as being an oppositional party, but also as being organizations such as we are, but also as being a woman in that organization. So I would always say that if you developed a lot of coping mechanisms, that is not good. Some sort of my advices will be that it's difficult when you think, because when you work in political organization, you have priorities of political organization, but also you have your own priorities. And I think that it's valuable to be in an organization where you can see that your own development is following and sustained by your organizational development. If it's only organization developing, that is not good. If it's only you developing, that is also not good. So if that would be some sort of the first thing that I would offer as an advice, that we need to reclaim that those two processes need to follow each other, but also that you need to be honest to yourself and to somehow recognize because I think that we as women often get to a situation where we will sacrifice our own development in order to or greater good or organizational development. We would always more care about the community that we will care about us, and really I saw many times that women were more prepared to say, okay, this is more important for organization, I will somehow back off. But the men didn't do that. And I think that the problem in our organization is that we didn't problematize that. We didn't say, this is not okay, you know. Maybe, that is your decision and we gave the space for that, but we should problematize that in some sort of a way. On what advice I am second probably or third, yeah. That you should not be drowned by all of that. So I'm not even in political theory. I'm not fan of individualism, but you need you need to feel that you have some sort of a mission there, and that you can see your path. And what I'm still trying to learn to say when organizations are not meeting my expectations in some sort of a way, where the organization will, because of its priorities, left you somehow behind. But the third thing that I think is really the most important, so I've been in 2 election campaigns. In both election campaigns, I think the most women that I worked with and that were in those campaigns, after the campaign, we were in total burnout. And the only thing that was helping us to survive that intensive period where, you learn a lot, you see a lot that is phenomenal, but also, it's really hard, is that we supported each other. So in each campaign, we have a sort of informal way of, talking with each other, sharing what is bothering us. I think that the problem for us, and that is my advice always, when you see that somehow support is created informally, that you need to see, because that is alarm that you need not just support, but that you need to change something institutionally, either to institutionalize that support or to see, because if 2 times you see that you need informal ways in order to cope with really stressful time, that means that you need to see what triggered that, what was happening, and to see what are the strategies to overcome that in the next period. And my final advice, also what I noticed, and also I would also invite you to understand my advice is that when you have organization that is growing, and the base is that in my organization I believe all people are good and want to do good for this society. So I don't question that, and you need something that you will not question. But also when organization is growing, that in that way, some problems are not for the time where you meant that they need to be solved. So the problems, many problems we are seeing now, but we are aware that we will not solve them now, that we are maybe not ready for them. So, choose the fights that are really important in that way. And finally, you need to, when you are choosing those fights, that what I noticed, that we as a woman are you know, I know a lot of men that are building, you know, circles really fast. But we as a woman are, you know, I will go to her or to her, but we will not make a group. And that is really my experience, that we are not united enough when it comes. We will be united separately, but we are still afraid to unitedly act on some important stuff. So I think that is the thing that broaderly we need to think about.
Yeah, I have nothing much to add except like what has been told to me, which I'm working still on boundaries, definitely. Like setting boundaries and also like sheltering yourself sometimes. Like self-care is important and rest is important. And also like it is fine to rely on others sometimes, so that's all.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, it's quite tricky because we are also passionate about this, super passionate, and that, like in every experience I hear, very often leads to a burnout. And yeah, thank you especially for flagging that out, especially in the month of mental health and how much is important. And yeah, I'm happy to hear about the support and having a women's group and now having this event, and potentially we will maybe organize some network to have more support. Again, mostly questions for Biljana and Natalija, but yeah. Did you have any, like, to be on a bit of positive side, did you have any feedbacks from women that you positively influenced, or and in which way? Like, did you receive any comments, or did you see anything, notice, like something on a positive note?
Yes, all the time. I have to admit that. Mostly, you know, we don't have enough of access to media in Serbia. That's a widely known problem of lack of political pluralism in the media, especially when it comes to public broadcaster and all these TVs with national frequency, which is the most important one because people mostly still watch TV, and that's how they get informed about politics. So what we usually do, you know, when we have different press release conferences for media, or our speeches in the parliament or city hall, we share a lot of this in social media, and then that's how we communicate with people, because many people then comment that, and mostly women support women, because we do try, and that's something for me, it's very, very important. That we try to have this gender perspective on pretty much anything we talk about, which I think is the reason why, even though we can proudly say we are feminist, but nobody can say, oh, they are feminists, they talk about just women issues like if this is something separate, because this is not a separate thing, it is everywhere. We try to communicate that everywhere. So you pretty much always have something that you can relate. You don't have to say it, but its approach is there. And I think this is very much recognized by women. And then mostly, you know, they would have these comments or write you directly to Twitter or Facebook or Instagram. I also did in last couple of months 2 podcasts, and I didn't realize how these were actually important because both are done by women who are feminist. One in particular, the entire basically podcast is dedicated to various feminist issues. And I also received a lot of even emails afterwards. You know, you mentioned this. Can you give me a recommendation what to read or where to find this information on various levels. I also had these situations which, because of my, you know, in a sense, dual identity, I'm still a university professor. I still teach, and of course I have to separate these. I don't talk about politics as a day politics, but I teach political theory. So, you know, because students now know me in these 2 roles, and then when they, I think it was important, you know, on various occasions when you speak up for the rights of, for instance, LGBT+ community, and then you meet some of these students in different events. I think it's very important for them to see their teacher there, maybe even more as a teacher and not as just a politician, but because I'm both in these situations, then, you know, they would come by, say thank you, and I think that's something you cannot measure. You know, these moments that you feel that you actually don't think you have done something special, but it's special for them. And as I remember, I had my, you know, moments when somebody said something that was important to me. I have never been a person to have role models like a favorite writer or favorite theorist or favorite what. I always have a group of people that I like to read or listen to. But it's always important that if you say something or do something that is important to someone at some moment. Also now when, I mean, because I also teach gender studies at University of Belgrade, and I have a course designed, it's called Feminism and Democracy, and when I speak with my students there, it's always interesting to reflect on topics that before were not so important to me because I thought they were not that radical enough, like the women's representation, and now because I'm a representative and a woman, then I can reflect how this actually, even on a just symbolical level, can be important. I'm not saying it's the most important thing, as I don't think. I truly think we need feminist representation, women's representation, but it's still, even on this symbolical level that you exist, it's important. So I felt that, you know, even before we entered institutions, but even more so now, because now we are much more visible. And also, it was also important that I raised some issues in the parliament about femicide, you know, and try to not just that, but you know, that was one that is very important in this country because it's basically epidemic of femicide, and these also reached quite a lot of women that had their reactions, and also men that had adverse reactions. But it has been very positive experience, and I think that's why one of my mission is that desire is that this inspires women to join. You know, especially great women in our own organization that are maybe not ready. They want to be activists, but they're not ready to be in front of the camera or to run for some you know, political position. I hope that you know, that they can find some inspiration in us that have done that, and that many of them know they can reach out to us and ask for anything. And if it's more of us, then it's easier for me as well, because then I don't have to do some things, and then at the end of the day, I can go back to my academic career once, completely, fully.
Yeah, well, I mostly on the city level, we did all of the things as a group, so when appreciation comes, it comes for the group and also for organization. I don't think that any of us is somehow, you know, I think it's important to do that as a group, because if one is speaking, there is also a lot of work before that one could speak about some topic. So I'm not a fan of that, you know, separate appreciation, as I would call them. But of course, there is a lot of people that I think are more interested how that looks like, from my experience, because people, oh, you are there, how it's going, how the assemblies look like, what you are doing, and so on. And what I think was our greatest impact is that people see us daily in the public transport. They see us that, you know, they see that politicians can be a normal people in terms that we don't have some sort of exclusive or fancy life. We have a normal life. So I think that most appreciations that I've heard come from that. All of the other were teamwork that we are just representing. And I mean, there is, of course, people will say you represented that greatly, but I think it's also very important to always, specify that the whole organization is standing beside that, and a lot of people that are not visible included their time and knowledge, experience, and everything in order for me to come there and say something. So I always see that as an appreciation of organization, not me particularly. The other thing that I think I'm more trying to influence and where I can feel that is that I'm trying to, support internally my colleagues in building a better organization, and I'm more a fan of seeing that, seeing how you influence the process than one thing, but also, I think that we need to somehow step out of that sort of personalized politics. We are a team, we are a collective, and the most important thing for me on organization that I know that nobody has exclusivity to make a decision without consulting others, and I think we should keep that. And I think we also should influence to the people that they also recognize that me standing there and talking about some measure is a lot of work, not just me coming up with that.
I have nothing to add.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, it's quite important that you mentioned positive feedback, because sometimes we forget to give it, and it's really a fast world. And yeah, to make yourself look approachable. So thank you. Next question would be for Biljana. Can you tell us more about the state of feminism? How is the network developed in Serbia, and how it works in the region, especially Balkans?
Yeah, well, we have tradition of feminists in different periods of different type of traditions in different periods of how the country also has changed. So it's very complicated history, and we benefit from many of these that acquire, won rights, and sometimes I think we maybe take them for granted. I think not us. We are aware that our rights are in danger, but many women in society, they might think that some things are won and not questioned, and don't really follow what is happening elsewhere, even in countries that used to be part of, let's say, Yugoslavia, like Croatia or others, or in the European Union, and we also have, different, especially in the period of the breakup of Yugoslavia, very anti-war feminist groups. And the question is whether we can call it a feminist movement as one that's united. I'm afraid maybe that would be too optimistic to say that. There are many also misunderstandings between these different groups, and you can see that whenever it's organization of the 8th March or some others. And unfortunately also, like in many other parts of the world, you have now gender wars as well. So this complicates things a lot. But what we try to do as a group, as a political group that has a strong women's group, we tried and I think managed quite well, with our capacities that we have now, to have conversations with those women's organizations in particular, regardless whether they are formal or informal, that they have some particular problems they're dealing with, and maybe proposals that we can politically articulate them. And I think we established good connections with everyone. We try not to, if there are some internal struggles, we try not to, how to say, not to meddle in, and try to be cooperative with everyone as much as possible, because it would be excellent if we could have some role in uniting this feminist front. We're not there yet, but I think maybe if some of our rights are really breached, challenged, the ones that we feel safe with, this will for certain happen. Usually, when you have an enemy, it gets easier to unite. I know now as an academic that you have attempts to have different networks to deal with it, not just scholarly, but also to have some kind of influence over policy. So one such event will happen in Skopje in about 10 days. And so it has this kind of crisscross of academic and also civil society, women's organization from civil society. But this, this has been going on for decades. So in a sense, sometimes it works better, sometimes it works worse. We are younger. When I talked with some of these women that are important names for like 20, 30 years, worked on important policy measures that have given us now some legislation that we have, say that I don't know, 6, 7 years things were better. That even in the parliament it had some result to have, for instance, women parliamentarians in one group. Now we can't practically talk to each other, so things can be worse, which is not good thing to say, but it's an invitation that we have to work on building this front, and it's bigger than just ours in political parties. I mean, we know that because we came from grassroots organization, and we want to maintain these foot at streets, and we try to do that, but now a little bit, maybe we are a little bit more focused on institutions because we are new institutions, so we have to, in a way, learn them and try to conquer them. But we have this strong base and good connections with civil society, especially with women's and feminist organizations. It would be a step further if we could somehow build this strong, more connected, and that the many maybe internal grievances that exist and that predates us can be put aside because there are more important things. So we try to play constructive role there. Probably will not always be possible. Sometimes you'll have to. Over some issues you have to pick a side, but whenever you don't have to, I think it's better to try to unite them all, because it was always, the history of feminism is history not of one feminism, but of feminisms. So it will always be contestation, and that's part of democracy, because we are a democratic party, and we cooperate with these democratic organizations in the civil society. Of course, we will have various clashes and conflicts, different arguments about different things. But we have to find a way to overcome that democratically. Even when we are in disagreement, that we always know what are some red lines after which we don't go. I have to say, I personally don't like this constant accusation that if you think this, you're not a feminist, or if you think this, you're not a leftist, because there's not one essence of being one thing that you have to be a feminist, or one thing, one criteria to complement and not to be one or another. Of course, there are some things, if you do, you probably will disqualify you for various groups, but not necessarily. You have to understand why some people say this or something else, and it cripples us all instead of making us stronger. because the enemy does not do that. You know, they unite, and we oftentimes fight each other. And I might have different position if I'm not a politician, but I think our role as politicians is not to do this, to try to make this, to try to find understanding, because I see the danger that is coming.
Thank you, especially for mentioning a bit of history and really important aspect, cooperation between us and not being exclusive. Now we have one question for Natalija. So if you could tell us a bit more on a local level, like what do you think is something that women can do more? Do you have any suggestions around it, or maybe some examples?
Yeah, well, when it comes to the local level, we pretty much did also what Biljana mentioned, try to, you know, talk with various groups that we know are engaging in local issues from the feminist perspective. So somehow our first idea was, let's give space to those people and be voice to the people that are working on the issues that we want to present. It's interesting that on local level it's pretty much open space, because nobody didn't do anything when it comes to a political life. So, for example, you have a parliamentary female network that is not functioning maybe, but it's as idea, maybe it's not bad. You don't have that on local level. You also, I see a various colleagues from the ruling party that are women that never spoke. They don't have a permission to do that. So I think that I really thought a lot about this, but I think that also on local level we need to understand their problems, and that it would be a great experience for us to hear them and for them to hear us on that side. So you don't have any sort of female political networking on local level, not as such that I'm familiar with. We have some sort of networking with our close colleagues in Zagreb and all the different Western Balkan green politicians, female politicians, but you know, I think that I cannot remember, but we had, it's always the issue that we will present always depends where, you know, where the problem can be solved in our legislative framework. So is that on parliamentary level, on a local level? I think that a lot of organizations were interested in the proposal that my colleague had, she's also Natalija, about the free menstrual hygiene for all the women in Belgrade. So we are still trying to collect different local initiatives in that term, but there is a lack, and I think that is the problem of our society. The local level and the level, it's totally destroyed. The level of centralization is big, and simply all the work from the civil society and everyone other were streaming, you know, that shaped the work of many organizations. So I think that we also need to rethink that on a local level, how we want to build and what networks we want to build.
Okay, thank you for sharing. Yeah, like I always think of centralization, and actually here being privileged to do so, and many women in rural areas are quite struggling, and we are struggling to reach to them as well. And the last question for Anja, because we were talking mostly about women, can you as well share more about the situation with non-binary people, non-cis men, gender non-conforming?
Yeah, so first of all, of course, as as I'm a cis woman, I am now talking in somebody else's name, but still, like, because we don't have now anybody here to talk per se, I will try to like gather information that I know from like academia, anthropological works, and feminist queer works from the past, and also from what I know from like non-binary, trans, and non-cis men people that I talk with or like read their experiences. But if I make any mistake, like I call everyone to correct me, of course. So I think that when we talk about Serbia, especially, we always like think about these LGBT plus queer communities in the sense of reflecting maybe Western communities, American communities, what we see on the internet, what we see on Twitter and so on, but the real life here is not Twitter. As one trans activist from Serbia said when there was this huge uproar about trans female that was advertising female bras, I believe in US. She said, like, I wish that I had time to be bothered by that. I'm just like trying to survive. I'm trying to find a work, to have enough money to save for like my life, to feed my dog, to have heating and things like that. Because in Serbia, as trans person and gender non-conforming person, you are absolutely discriminated. There is more chance for you to be violated, for you to be abused, for you to be harassed. I'm not going to go into like who is having it worse, like are cis women having it worse or something, like the question that sometimes is being pushed, because like it's not oppression Olympics. And I don't see any point in that, but we have to realize that these are people who are fighting for their lives on an everyday basis. We recently were really, really shocked by the murder of the young trans girl in Serbia. She was 18, she was brutally murdered, and police did not do anything pretty much for 2 weeks. They did not investigate fully, and it was shocking because in that case I saw my whole queer friend community. Like that could be any one of these people, because we do not talk about like identification per se, we're talking about somebody's life. So I just would like to, when we, as Biljana mentioned, we have these like movement issues in Serbia that we are arguing so a lot about these issues, but I want to invite everybody to think how important it is that we help for those that can't, maybe don't have power to help themselves. Like me here, sitting here talking now, it's still a privilege because I can sit here and talk as cis woman. So many trans women, so many trans men, so many non-binary people, they can't come out, they can't talk about themselves, they can't openly talk about themselves. They're being discriminated on every single level, starting from the family level, then local level, then city level, then the state level. And I think like even the whole Balkan area and Eastern Europe, I believe like the situation is pretty similar, sadly. And I'm a strong believer in intersectional feminism. I think every part of feminist history has taught us something, but like in this day and age, we have to have that empathy as a tool of fight, and we have to think about what other people in our like movement are fighting with and fighting against, and to fight against our common enemy, which is like the system, patriarchal, oppressive system, imperialist, colonistic, capitalist system that is oppressing us all. And again, we don't have to, as women, fight every single battle, but I do believe we are supposed to not disregard anybody else. We're not supposed to fight against them, but simply fight with them, because like together we can do much more than we can do on our own. Like if I fight my own battle for myself, okay, sure, like I'm gonna have it nice and lovely, but still I'm not going to be seen as somebody who is outside of my own fight. Maybe I won't have all the rights, but if fight all together, they can't disregard us all. If we're all together, if we're all loud, like it's at one point it has to break. I really truly believe in that. And the history of feminism is so intertwined with the history of queer movement and LGBT plus rights. I don't think we can separate it. I don't think we should separate it, because like it's not a clear cut. It's not black and white. It's not something that we should say like we're only fighting for this type of women. But you don't have to, you alone, be the one who is fighting every fight, but don't fight against the others. So just, we should, especially in Serbia, think about that it's somebody's life, that it's somebody's survival, everyday survival, and to remind ourselves that everyone should have the right to live normally, to live with dignity, to have food, to have work, to have health care. And I don't care what you pretty much think on your own when you're not speaking out loud, when you're not like doing hate speech. But just for starters, like, please, let's be gentle to each other, because we should like rely on empathy. I think that as a collective feminist movement and as a collective green movement, we should really like take that as an advantage. As we talked also, like, we are always thinking about politics should be rational. We should all think like man. We should take this as women, this man power, position of being rational. But I think differently. I think we should take this empathy as a tool and stand with each other and support each other. When I'm weak, maybe one of these like non-binary trans people are going to take care of me as well. So I think we can only have something to gain from that.
Thank you for sharing. It's tricky, and because we don't have the representation here, but thank you for trying to. Now I will open the floor for questions from the audience. So if anyone has a question, yes?
Yes, we do have a question from the people who are watching us right now.
Okay, we'll be sharing microphones.
Yes, sure. So we got a question from our audience who are right now watching this. And the question is, how do you balance tasks, work, political engagement, housework, childcare that mostly fall on women?
You simply can't do it all. It's impossible. I have to say I have great support in my partner, and in this particular situation, when I became an MP, he took over much more of. He has done it before as well, but he now does more of this house and childcare activities than I do, because simply he's more at home and I'm not. So in that sense, I tend to say I'm grateful, but at the same time, I also know that this is a normal situation in different, roles for men, that they're not grateful to women doing that because they say it's normal. So even though our partnership is based on an equality, and these are the values that are basically that we have, it's still something that is unusual for this society. I have examples like that both in my own family and among my friends, but these are still exceptional cases. This is all involved with, in general, feeling of guilt that women usually have, and mothers in particular, if you're not all the time with your child, and also guilt that is imposed on you by society that looks at you and you are in the parliament and not at home or something like that. It was interesting. I think it was unexpected feminist speech by one MP that usually I think for me it was very interesting, because I don't think she I don't think she would subscribe maybe as a feminist, or maybe she would, but she also had some other statements that were really not how to say, not in line with feminism. But it was very authentic that she once has given a speech about how the parliamentary works is organized in Serbia, in particular, how we don't know what are our working hours, because we don't know whether the session will last after midnight at 3 a.m. or will end at 6. We just don't know that. There was only one short period of time when we knew that. But, and this should be in a normal type of work, and in general we work abnormally, like what should be exceptional by the rule book. And she said to the speaker of our parliament that he is the worst employer she has ever had, because of this, because she doesn't know when she will be with her kids. And his reply was a typical example of this patriarchal speech, you know, that basically he attacked her, that she's not always around, you know, she's probably always with her kids or stuff like that. So you get this, even though you have maybe for yourself internally organized this somehow to get support from family to do everything that you have. I mean, I don't hire anyone to do the cleaning, you know, so we do the cleaning. It just you have to organize when I do it, when my partner does it, you know. But with the kid, you know, being with her, you know, we both work, and I have this additional work. It's much more difficult. So of course we have also people from the family jumping in, and sometimes you just need help. But I find some kind of comfort in saying that it's important to have quality time, and that I'm also fighting for the better world for her. So I find some comfort in it, but certainly it's not an ideal thing. It's almost impossible. But but many of the policies we advocate for are precisely based on this. We talk about the need for more preschools and kindergartens that will be accessible to all children, because we don't have them enough. This would also help many other women to do other things, to have some hobby, and to make politics to be their hobby, if nothing else. Because the problem with women is, you know, time. They don't have time. They work double shifts and everything. So you need. It's always two things. One is, we have these values that we preach, or within our own families, within our own partnership, to share duties that we have to do, and to have support by society through institutions. And so we can maybe individually deal with this internally, but we still need institutions. And when we ask for this institution, we do it both for ourselves, but for everybody else. But I just won't lie, it's extremely hard, extremely challenging, and you constantly feel guilty about not doing everything perfect. You're not a perfect mother, you're not a perfect worker, you're not a perfect politician, because you try to do it all. But it is also a statement that we have the right to have it all. Nobody can have it all the time. You know, you have to, one day you do this, and you take the other day off for doing other things. So we need to make this readjustment, and to fight for this, that this is not something that I can do, but that other women can do. I can also do it because maybe because of the other privileges that I have. I don't think I'm particularly very privileged, but in a sense that I still can do it means that I have some privilege. Many women cannot even think about doing this. So I'm aware of where I'm privileged and where I actually fight hard to just maintain doing all of this altogether.
Yeah, I don't have a child, but don't worry, that doesn't increase the quality of my management of work-life balance. So, I mean, the biggest problem in political life in Serbia is that you cannot plan anything. So you don't know pretty much how something will look like, and on the other hand that you have political processes, you have organizational party processes, and everything that is like a mishmash. I mean, I don't see how we will survive this without a support system. And maybe my story is interesting because my support system are females, my family, my sisters, and mother, dominantly the sister that I'm living with, where often, first I think I didn't realize what kind of work I was doing around the home until I stopped doing that. I mean, stopped in terms that often somebody else will, will need to do that because I'm scheduling the cleaning and so on. But the other hand is that, I don't think that also I as a woman learned how to be enough grateful that some other woman is taking the tasks that I cannot manage. So I really don't see how I would be able to have time for all of this, to be committed on that level if I didn't have that support all the time and that understanding. So, thanks for my support system. That is all that is keeping me in a sort of a life, not a balance.
Yeah, I also can't say from the mother viewpoint, but it's constantly that moment where you balance, for me, like 2 different works, sometimes 3 at moments, and the activism and trying to have social life, trying to have stable relationship, trying to see my family. And people who know me know that I'm sometimes, feel like the dog running in circles and constantly repeating the same mistakes. And I'm trying to learn more how to organize, and as I mentioned, like put those boundaries, say no to some things, that it's not always on me. It's interesting because when I finished my PhD, I was talking with my colleague and said, like, but isn't this, he's a male colleague, isn't this infuriating how as academic, as anthropologist, you always feel like I did not read everything, I did not do everything, I can do more, I did not put everything into it. And he was like, no. And I was like, okay, so imposter syndrome, I guess. And this is something I constantly hear from other women, that we maybe are putting even too much on ourselves, feeling that we are not enough, we are not doing enough. We are having to prove, not even to others, but just to ourselves, that we are allowed to take space, that we are allowed to rest, that we are allowed to eat healthy or breathe or have vacation or do something. Like I'm in that moment where I'm trying to learn how to rest, how not to do like, oh, I have a free day, so let's bike for 30 kilometers because it's gonna backfire tomorrow. But I'm like, if I lie down, if I just rest, I'm wasting time. I'm not doing anything productive. So I have to do everything all the time. So I think it's still like psychological process. Sometimes my house will be mess and I just have to accept it. Like I won't have time to clean my laundry because I'm just going to enter house, change myself, take a shower and rush back out. Sometimes I won't be able to cook meal, homemade meal, healthy meal, sustainable meal, because I will have to eat something from bakery. Some days I will drink 5 coffees, probably today, but like next week I'm gonna rest a bit. I'm gonna take it easy more. I'm going to cancel plans. I'm going to say, okay, guys, girls, I'm not answering chat. I'm not doing this. I am taking care of myself right now. And also, like both Natalie and Biljana mentioned, support system. I'm so grateful for having supportive partner, supporting family, supportive friends. Like these days, for example, my friends would message me like, do you need something? Can we help you? And even though like there was nothing that they could help me with, even hearing that those words were helpful enough. Like somebody's taking care of me even when I'm not taking care of myself. And that means a lot. That means a lot that somebody's willing. If I said like, can you print this? Can you do this? Can you, I don't know, like go to my apartment and clean it? So I am sure like those people would be there for me. And even if I'm not asking somebody to do something, even knowing that they, if it comes to that, they will do it, it means like world to me.
Thank you so much for sharing. Do we have any more questions online? No, okay. And from the people here? Okay, we have, can you pass the microphone?
Everybody knows my name. Hi, just bear with my social anxiety. So I have a question and a feedback on a positive feedback. So for me personally, like feminism is one of the most important things, and I've been in a lot of different groups, and I've been not in the group. I don't think that being in a group makes you a feminist. And I've been in activism, I think, my whole adult life, which is like 12, 13 years, a long time. And for me personally, it comes in waves. Like, I get super pessimistic, I get super tired. I just get in this mood of like, why anything? When you are in it for so long and you see so little change, you're like, is there a point of me actually, what all of you were saying, like taking time, taking energy, taking mental health, like, is there a point to it? And I wanted to say that for me, I am now in this, in this wave of like, I can't, like it's too much at the moment. And I wanted to say like that having, Anja is my best friend, and that having her like actually being here and fighting and doing these things, it kind of makes me optimistic in these pessimistic waves of like knowing that even if I, in just informal ways, like just as a friend, not as a, like knowing that she has these positive like stories and she has these positive things to say about other women, and just knowing that even when you're tired and when you can't, you know that there are still people who are fighting, and that you're not like, it's not, everything is not gonna fall apart if you stop. So I just wanted to say that like, I think just you showing up anywhere, I think you need to know how important it is, not only in the political and activistic way, but I think in like in the ways of your friends, especially female friends, just knowing that you fight and that you're there, even if they don't want or can't or don't know how to, they just have this, I have this feeling of like, okay, like there is still a bit of hope. So that's just a feedback on a positive feedback. And a question that I had is connected to this like yelling and being more aggressive. I wrote here like, usually when people from abroad ask me, I say this very like funny and sad comment that like Serbians are like cave people. We have this way of just like doing things very cave-like, like yelling and not respecting everybody. So I was thinking like, would you say it's a cultural thing, or is it a male thing? Like, or would you like have that together? Because we are a very patriarchal country, and I don't think you can make that different. But it's still, having heard from all of you, it's like, like, wait, this is a bit weird. And that's one of the questions, and the second one connected to that is like, would you work on changing that? Or is it something that you use, that you kind of just need to, at this moment, take upon yourself and use and be this person who will yell at the end of the day? Like, is there a space for changing that at the moment? Or is it just like, okay, we have to like kind of camouflage in this surrounding and just become these people if we want to change something? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for this positive comment. It's very moving. Thank you. I think it's for us. It's also important because one day, as I said before, one day, you know, we should retire, you know, maybe, or for a while, you know, and it's important that somebody else, that we know that somebody else has took over. When it comes to yelling, I think like there are different situations. So there is one where you are, there's different situation when you are within your organization where you have strict rules, strict in a sense that they're written up when we'd all accepted them in like in ethical code or in a statute or forms of communication. When you breach that, I think it's not a good thing. And we have quarrels about that, and they are very important. And it's important that we say this is not okay. It's understandable. It happens to everyone. And we should understand also the pressures that people are in and that sometimes they snap. But we should not condone this. And we have our own, how to say, internal instruments to fight this. But as Natalija said, then the thing is that we are you know, within our organization, we try to prefigure the society we want to build. But the society we want to build is not there yet. And when we, as we are, you know, also struggling to have these values embodied within our own organization, you know, because the enemies are oftentimes within ourselves, even with our colleagues. They might support our feminist causes, but that doesn't mean they are not patriarchal, whether they want to admit that or not. And women can also be patriarchal as well. So, you know, we have to fight our own enemies, but it's easier within the organization because, you know, these are the things that got us here. These are our common values that are keeping us to be a movement. But when we go out, then it's completely hostile environment. And then oftentimes, even citizens that support you tell you, you should be more aggressive. You know, they want democratic values, they want your values, but they see that this is not working. And then you are like, how do I do both of these two things? So I think then you know, sometimes you have to, I think it's justifiable to be more aggressive if it's authentic, if you can say, I was forced. You know, I was completely neglected. I was invisible, like powerless people in society. Nobody hears them. And if I'm powerless, there is a reason why I have to yell, because I need your attention. I'm speaking about something important. But if I don't do that, it's only aggression. And then it doesn't matter whether I'm a feminist or a leftist. It's only aggression. If I'm actually heard, I have all other instruments, but I yell, it's not necessary. So I think there's a situation when this is necessary because you have to say it's important, I'm there, I'm saying something important, you cannot disregard me, I don't allow that. And of course it has to, you know, it also has to come naturally to you personally. For some it's more natural than for others. As I say, I also think when it comes to Serbia is patriarchal, but also people here are loud in general, women as well. I mean, we're loud as people. Some people are not, but majority, I would say, we're really loud. We speak loudly. I mean, I got these comments oftentimes when I have foreign friends. They say, you're speaking very loud, you know. So I think it's also something, I oftentimes hate the arguments of culture. I never use it, but I would say there are some threats to how we do things. But I think it's mostly about the patriarchal society. And also about the fact that we have not developed this democratic public culture because, you know, we had constant crisis shifts of ideologies, of state formations. So It's here and there, and we haven't been living peacefully for a long time to develop some of our own authentic democratic public culture. So we simply don't have it. We have to, at the same time, build institution in this public culture, and this is hard. It's impossible. It takes time. So I think now I say this also as a democratic theorist. I think there, like when you justify civic disobedience, sometimes you can justify things that are uncivil, but only if it's for the good reasons, because other things haven't worked, you know. So, but you have to have, you know, why you do it, and you don't. It doesn't become a habit, and that you can't justify it. And in history, you would always see that basically even non-violent movements succeeded with the help of some of the violent ones. Unfortunately, that's history. It's not what I'm advocating, but just that's the fact. So, unfortunately, sometimes maybe somebody is also in a way. You sacrifice yourself to push some arguments, but somebody else with a different type of temperament or character can be rewarded. But that's why it's important that we're all a collective, because you sometimes have to push for something, and maybe then you need somebody to calm this down and to say this was absolutely necessary or absolutely not necessary. So we have to distinguish between that. But I also think there are sometimes situations where you can trick the system with a humor or something like that. It's not always possible, but sometimes it is. I had one situation in the parliament that one MP from the majority party was talking brutal lies about me and about all of us in the organization. And of course, I was preparing to reply, to respond to him, but somehow, I don't know how it happened, whether he first started it, we started laughing, and it was so funny that it wasn't planned, it was just like authentic. We started laughing, and I started sending him kisses, like, he was over there. And then they were shocked, and then he sent a kiss back, and the speaker was like, stop sending these kisses. And then I stood up and replied, with arguments why these were lies. But I think it was also like sometimes you need to shock them and maybe to calm things down, precisely because you then will be more persuasive. But you have to have it in you at this moment. You can't fake this. Like if somebody would say to me, you do this in this situation, if I don't feel it, I just can't do it. So if you feel it, that you can do it, if you can make a mockery, sometimes that's also more like us. But sometimes you're simply angry, and it's completely fair you show that you're angry.
Yeah, I will touch a little bit about the question of the culture, because, culture isn't something that was developed outside of everything. It's patriarchal culture. That is I think even when we talk about that, I mentioned I'm from Vranje. The reason that I'm usually loud is because even in my classroom, all the boys were really loud. When I wanted to be heard, I needed to shout, and that doesn't come because we are from Vranje, but because
Vranje is patriarchal.
But because the Serbia is patriarchal, boys are learned that they can be loud. Girls are learned to be decent, to be quiet, to be obedient, to be nice, to be polite. We are not learned to be loud, and we are not learned to yell. So. I don't think that we can distinguish those two. When it comes to the yelling part, I will just add a few things. I think Biljana explained it lovely. For each of us that I know that are in parliament and in city council, first time when that happened, that wasn't pleasant. I didn't feel comfortable doing that. I wasn't in that moment aware that I'm doing that. But as she said, you're constantly in some hostile environment, and sometimes, you know, I'm not so much humorous, I'm mostly sarcastic. So when our president of the assembly is saying that he's opening the assembly and saying this is the temple of democracy now, this assembly, and I'm like, well, for the 15 years, you know, and after like 3 minutes after that, he violated the code, and I'm like, okay, it lasted really long, I think we should applaud to that. But you know, sometimes I can bear with that in that way, but sometimes it goes like, it's not only that you see us that we are talking, they are also in city parliament, we are like 2 meters apart. So it's not like they are talking only when we are out, but they are trying somehow, and we also to took pressure on them in between. You know, I think, maybe this is crazy that I will say, but that yelling came naturally in some situations. You simply didn't know, I think, what to do. And in hostile environment, I don't think that in some situation we can control it, and I don't think that we use it as a strategy, because even when we are now doing that, I can see that all of us are sort of shivering when we are talking in that way. It's not pleasant, it's not something that we are like, no, we are this type of person. No, we are not. But if someone doesn't leave you a choice, and just to be fair, most of the Belgrade assemblies are decent on, you know, anti-level. It's always mostly decent. So it's not like in state parliament where it's, yeah, I don't have a word. But sometimes there are situations where I think you as a person, you as a human, cannot, I personally don't know how to handle that someone is somehow harassing you and lying about you. And even, as Biljana said, people will learn you how to use that situation in the best way. We are not still the people who can use that situation. We act just like people.
With the word culture, my anthropological background woke up. The thing is, when I use the word cultural, I kind of always mean this intertwined socioeconomic, historic background that shapes us, because like culture does not exist in a vacuum. Culture is not like something that is born out of nothing. And like everything else, I think like this culture here also came from all this like socioeconomic and historical background. And just like I realized, for example, at these international assemblies, we clicked best with Azerbaijani people when it comes to humor. Like it was like this dark, very sometimes worrying humor, but like we realized we are kind of realize how it is to grow up in the region surrounded by conflict, where sometimes our own countries will be aggressors, where we'll go outside and first question we're going to be asked is, can you tell me about genocide? And you're like, thank you, this is not a first date question, and things like that. And in the same sense, I think men here are shaped by first patriarchy, as it was mentioned, but also by this history of violent conflicts on this region. And so they have shaped to be like that. They have shaped to be aggressive and to channel their anxiety kind of through aggression. Yeah. And I don't think like men have good mental health tools that can relieve their anxiety, and in that sense, I don't envy them. I think that it's not okay here for men to express their emotions unless it's through violence and anger. And maybe I'm not like, I'm just rationalizing that in the same sense. As I mentioned, like we have to work together towards the goal. And that is also about the other part, like we have to work together to shape this culture where we won't have to yell anymore. Sadly, right now, I think like we have to yell sometimes, but like try to talk when we can and explain why it maybe hurts us, why it's not good, why we shouldn't do that, why we should stay calm, say like, okay, if we are yelling, this is where I drew the line, like this does not go further, like in private lives, and after that also in our like political lives, if those can be separated, of course, even. And the thing is that we are the ones that want to fight patriarchy. Nobody, sadly, is going to do for us. And when I was talking this summer with other feminists from other countries, they were like, but it's a heavy burden to bear. Why are always us who have to fight? But sadly, like, I can't expect anybody else to read my thoughts and know what I want, and I have to fight. It shouldn't be like that, but I'm doing it for future generations, just as like women before me did that for me, because before some women couldn't even yell, and we now fought for the right to yell at least. So if nothing, I'm going to use that right when it's necessary. Not always, not to be aggressive, not to become this, take that tool and become that person who is embodiment of the patriarchy myself, but just like sometimes we have to fight on somebody else's terms, sadly, but we're working towards something better, I believe.
Thank you for the questions. We won't be accepting any more questions, so I would like to thank our attendees, both here and online, and our panelists, and would like to invite you for maybe some final comments if you have them. We talked a lot. Yeah. Okay. Yes, I'm gone with the voice. Yes, I'm inviting you to follow future events of CDN, of Green Youth of Serbia, and Green Left Front as well. If you want to know more about Green Youth of Serbia, here is Anja and some other members here as well. About CDN, I'm here, and Georgi from the office. And yeah, for Green Left Front, you have our panelists. And yeah, now I'm inviting you for a bit of networking. What you didn't manage to ask, you will have a chance for a bit later, and I'm inviting you for a bit of food and refreshments. So, and thank you everyone once again.